Hey, L'Shana Tova. How's everybody doing out there? Doing all right. So far, so good. That was a cheap dad joke. You're going to have to put up with a lot more of that now because I'm on a 3-year contract. But seriously, it is an honor and a privilege to be part of a kehillah community that was founded in 1876 by 18 Yiddish-speaking peddlers from Lithuania. In Gematria, Hebrew numerology, 18 equals the letters Chet Yud, or Chai, which means life, as in L'chaim. From this small tree of life of 18 founders, Ohavi Zedek grew to become a center of Jewish life in Vermont for almost 150 years. Just as the old heartwood at the center of a tree, whoops, sorry, I skipped something. As the founders of this kehillah knew, the essential ingredient for keeping the tree of life alive and flourishing is tending the flame of Jewish memory. This eternal flame tending is a sacred project that we participate in collaboratively across generations for millennia. Even in times of great darkness, when people tried to snuff out the flame, we always kept the light of Torah burning. To be Jewish is to see the world in many layers of past, present, and future, all at once, a kind of Pali vision. When we learn about our history, we're not just learning about our ancestors, we're learning about ourselves. Just like that tree that grows new rings every year, our life is built on the foundation of the layers of tree deep inside the trunk. Just as the old heartwood at the center has no living or growing cells anymore, but provides strength, structure, and stability for the tree, our ancestors still stand with us and support our efforts today. When you step into these doors, you can really feel the presence of Jewish American history. In the lobby hangs the Lost Ark mural from Chai Adam that was across the street from the old Ozy building. It's an incredible relic of the style of art that once graced wooden synagogues in Europe that were destroyed during the Holocaust. The lost mural was discovered behind a wall during a renovation and brought back to life in the heart of our collective Jewish home. And have you seen the stunning copper ark and gold lions, the prayer stands and benches from the original Ozy building on Archibald Street that have also been brought into our home? You can see this historic work in progress if you step into our small sanctuary today. And in our lounge, we have a very special Sefer Torah that was saved from the gutter on the night of Kristallnacht and was brought here by Harry and Irene Kahn of blessed memory, along with a wooden hutch where it's kept. On the eve of Yom Kippur, we will hold and kiss this holy Torah as part of our annual Kol Nidre procession. And these brass 7-branched menorahs that were separated from each other and hiding in dark, dusty corners of our building. Who knows how long it's been since they were actually lit up with fire. Here they are again, illuminating our sanctuary. These most sacred remnants of the old north end of Burlington, what was once called Little Jerusalem, have been brought back to life. And now we come together today in the year 5784 as they inspire us to rebuild Little Jerusalem of Vermont for our time. This has always been the central work of our people, finding treasures from the past that were lost due to persecution and disintegration, and working collectively to bring the pieces back together in new ways so they'll come to life and bring healing to the world. In every generation, there were times when hope threatened to leave the world. It's told that in such times, the Baal Shem Tov, the great healer and founder of Hasidic Judaism in the 1700s, would go to a secret place deep in the Carpathian Mountains of Ukraine. He would go especially on Rosh Hashanah, when the book of life is open to be written. There he would light a sacred fire in a tree, in a secret way, and chant an ancient prayer invoking the long-forgotten, most sacred name of God. And in doing this, the danger was averted and hope stayed alive. In later times, when disaster threatened, the Maggid of Mezrich, his disciple, would go to the same place in the forest on Rosh Hashanah and say, Ribono shel Olam, Master of the universe, I do not know how to light the fire, but I can say the prayer. And again the danger was averted and hope stayed alive. Still later in the next generation, his disciple, Moshe Leib of Sassov, would go to the same place in the forest and burst into tears and pray, Ribono shel Olam, Master of the universe, I don't know how to light the fire or say the prayer, but I found my way to this place, and that must be enough. And it was. Hope stayed alive and the danger was averted. Later, when Israel of Rishon needed intervention from heaven, he sat in his chair, in his study, with his head in his hands, Ribono shel Olam, Master of the universe. I no longer know how to light the fire, nor how to say the prayer. We can't even find our way back to the place anymore. But I can tell the story, and that must be enough. And it was. And now here we are today, the year 5784, and yet again hope threatens to leave the world. We hear the shofar alarm calling us to wake up and take action in the smoke of the forest from Canada that burnt our lungs and clouded our skies. We hear the shofar crying from the catastrophic floods that destroyed people's homes, farms, and businesses. And in the record-breaking heat waves, droughts, hurricanes, and floods from around the world. The shofar is blaring so loudly right in our ears, and yet we watch ourselves moving in slow motion to respond to a crisis which has already created more refugees than all the world wars combined. We can hear the shofar crying when we see that Israelis and Palestinians are farther from a peaceful agreement than perhaps ever. And the citizens of Israel have never been more divided about how the country should be run. It's enough to make us want to give up hope. In times like these, our Torah, our traditions, and our stories are a more vital medicine than ever before. Through Torah and Jewish ritual, we come to see that we're not just living our individual life stories, but we are characters in a much larger story of our people that goes back to the beginning of human civilization. As we study the ancient stories, we begin to remember why we're here, how we were forced to leave our motherland and felt abandoned by Avinu Shebashamayim, our Father in heaven, how for 2,000 years we've been orphans of human history, refugees wandering the face of the earth. However, the ancient Midrash promises that wherever Israel was exiled through the ages, the Shekhinah, the presence of the Divine Mother, accompanied them. That presence is still here with us today. And as we gather to study, to pray, and to eat together, to grow our community, she is still with us. The Shekhinah is still here. And as we can see today, we have never stopped talking to Avinu Shebashamayim, our Father in heaven. We have many words to say. The Jewish people began as a small family and became a tribal people. We don't proselytize or try to convert others. The only way we can grow is by learning and practicing Judaism ourselves and teaching it to our children. Islam and Christianity have a universalist strategy and a universal goal: convert everyone and bring the Messiah. Tragically, both of these religions were used by a few greedy and power-hungry people as weapons for colonial expansion that led to the abuse and genocide of native lands and peoples all over the world. The vast majority of Christians and Muslims today, of course, are peaceful, and at the core, their traditions share the same universal human values that we do. So, of course, there's still hope for the Abrahamic family reunion. Judaism also has a universal goal for all of humanity, but we use a particularist strategy to reach that goal. We're a particular people from a particular land with a particular tradition, working tirelessly for millennia toward the universal goal of making this world into the Garden of Eden. We don't need anyone to convert to Judaism because we believe that all righteous humans will merit the world to come. You don't have to be Jewish, as Rabbi Yossi Klein Halevi put it. Judaism has no expectation that humanity will become Jewish. Instead, the role of the Jews is to be a spiritual avant-garde, attesting to God's presence, not least through their improbable survival, and helping prepare humanity for its breakthrough to transcendence, a particularist strategy for a universal goal. The prophets foretold back in the 8th century before Common Era that the Jewish people are meant to be an or l'goyim, a light unto the nations. Today, we renew our commitment to this holy mission by standing together, singing ancient prayers, and heeding the cry of the shofar. Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Harat Olam, the birthday of the world. According to the Talmud, this is the day that human beings were created. So whether you're Jewish or not, all of us in this room today, we are all children of the first humans. And so we're all standing here together before our Creator on this day. Rosh Hashanah is also called Yom HaZikaron, Day of Remembering, alluding to the idea that on this day, all of our actions in the past year are remembered, and that also with the deeds of our ancestors as well. On Rosh Hashanah, we're not standing alone. Rabbi Shimon Jacobson teaches, we might be small, but we stand on the shoulders of giants. Although we're puny, we can see even farther than the giants because we're standing on the shoulders of the past generations. A few years ago, in the spring, my cousin and I traveled to the Carpathian Mountains of Ukraine to look for the gravestones of our ancestors and restore them after so many years of neglect. We did not know the exact location, but we had the story to guide us. Right from the beginning of the journey, we could feel the presence of my great-aunt Muncie and my uncle and my grandpa Nandor, who grew up there. It was like they were helping us find the missing pieces of our past. Maybe that's why, even though we'd never been to these places before, they felt strangely familiar. I realized then that we've only been in America for a few generations, while some of our ancestors were in Europe during the Roman Empire. The Jewish family has grown and put down roots so many times only to be torn apart and scattered like seeds in the wind. Today, Jews are only 2.2% of the world's population. The vast majority of us live in Israel or America, where we make up a mere 2.4% of the U.S. population, although we take up a lot more space than 2.4%. After this journey through the old country, I couldn't help but wonder, how deep are our roots in America today? How many generations will this world last? It's up to us, isn't it? We started off in Munkach, Ukraine. We were in search of the grave of our great-great-great-grandfather, Reb Shlomo Gross, who was known to be the favorite student, the chassid of the Munkacher Rebbe. The Munkach Hasidic traditions can be traced directly back to the Baal Shem Tov, the great healer in the story I told, who lit the fire in the tree and said the prayer that kept hope alive. As I walked along the river in the center of the city, I imagined what it was like there on Rosh Hashanah, with crowds of people on the bridge, praying that they too would be remembered for good and inscribed in the book of life, casting their breadcrumbs into the water. Their presence was still there, even if I was the only one to notice. I felt like a walking ghost among the Ukrainians. Unlike Germany, most of Eastern Europe has yet to take responsibility or heal from the massive wounds of the Holocaust. Our hope was that this trip would help us at least begin some of the healing for our own family. Although I have to admit that Ukraine's relationship with Jews has improved slightly since a Jewish comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, became their president in a landslide victory and has gone on to become their George Washington, one of their greatest heroes. What a crazy paradox of history. Just as Burlington's North End was called Little Jerusalem, once upon a time, Munkach, Ukraine, was known by Jews all over the world as Jerusalem of the Carpathians. We saw many old photos of the Jewish street of Munkach, overflowing with people singing and dancing at weddings. I could feel a glimmer of light in the darkness, only then to be snuffed out by even more photos of Jews filling that same square when their neighbors gladly volunteered to round them up like cattle and ship them off to Auschwitz. Nobody there wants to talk about what the role that their relatives played in the Holocaust. It's not that it's too painful. They just haven't been taught to care. There's no Holocaust education officially in Ukraine, so the younger generation doesn't even know what their grandparents did. This is what happens when a society refuses to do the essential work of tshuva, repentance, restoration, and healing. On the first 2 mornings, we went to pray at the old shul of the Munkacher Rebbe, and it felt so good to be around fellow Jews and hear their deep Hasidic accents, Hallelujah, and oh mine. I thought, this is how my ancestors must have talked. After davening, we ate home-fried potatoes, pickled herring, and vodka with the minyan regulars. None of them spoke a lick of English, but there was a sense of brotherhood that made us smile at each other and say, L'chaim. Then we were off to the old Jewish cemetery of Munkach, where our ancestor, Reb Shlomo Gross, Alav Shalom, and other relatives are buried. What we found there was heartbreaking. In the 70s, the Russians bulldozed and destroyed all of the headstones to build a flea market. There were plenty of other areas nearby that they could have picked, but instead they saw an opportunity to finally erase our presence from the land. In the next cemetery, we looked for Reb Shlomo Gross's wife, Chaya Sora. The grass and the shrubs were so high and the ground so uneven that we kept stumbling onto unmarked graves. We never found her either. It was so hot that day, and the mitzvah of honoring the deceased kept us out there past the point of exhaustion. After leaving the cemetery, overheated and emotionally beat up, we poured water over our hands and headed up into the Carpathian Mountains to find a place to cool off. Our guide happened to know someone who lived next to a mountain stream. I felt a glimmer of peace. Maybe it was near that place in the woods where the Baal Shem Tov lit the fire and said the prayer that kept hope alive. We immersed in the cold, pure mountain waters, and soon smiles were returning to our faces. I thought about that story of the Baal Shem Tov in the forest and how every time in history it was the story that saved us and kept hope alive. Our people were not born in Auschwitz. We were born with the cry of the shofar that came through the mountain, through the fire in Mount Sinai. More powerful than the haters is the love of the Jews for our tradition, a love that has not failed even in the face of the darkest moments in history. Those of us who have lived in a relatively safe world would like to turn away from such horror, but Judaism insists that upon memory hangs the only hope for redemption. As they say, those who cannot confront their past will be enslaved to it. We drove the next day at breakneck speed on windy, narrow, potholed roads through the mountains of Hungary and Ukraine to a small town in Romania where my great-grandpa Aaron had a kosher butchery and a salami factory and raised my grandpa. We arrived just before nightfall, and despite the lack of light, we were guided by the incredibly kind Christian family of caretakers to locate his grave, which had not been visited for over 75 years. His epitaph read in Hebrew, "Here is buried a simple, honest, and upright man, Ish Tam v'Yashar, who feared Hashem. His home was a place for Torah scholars and was open widely to the poor. Kohen of Hashem, Aaron Zegelstein, son of our teacher and Rabbi Menachem Nachum Segel of blessed memory." Wow, I thought, I really am standing on the shoulders of giants. I came to see how my grandpa and my aunts were also giants for escaping Eastern Europe and bringing the family to safety in America. Back in Europe, they were beaten up for being Jewish. My grandpa left Romania as Nandor Zegelstein. He was in search, though, for the American dream, so he changed his name to Dick Zag. And he joined the Merchant Marines and played trumpet and professional jazz in big bands. Now, today, we're finally fully accepted as American, well, mostly, but our lives are somewhat empty, and we're lost without our Yiddishkeit, our Jewish roots. Throughout history, our people have faced tremendous obstacles and political instability, and we've had every reason to give up hope and to despair. From slavery in Egypt, destruction of 2 Jewish kingdoms, the Crusades, the Inquisition, the expulsion, the pogroms, and of course, the Holocaust. Since its founding in 1948, the modern state of Israel has had to defend her civilians against constant attacks from neighboring countries and terrorist organizations. Every adult Israeli is a trained soldier ready to defend their people. In spite of all of this, or because of it all, Israel's national anthem is Hatikvah, which means the hope. The shofar wakes us up and sends a message deep inside us that there still is hope. But that hope depends on us taking action. Elie Wiesel of blessed memory used to say, hope is like peace. It's not a gift from God. It's a gift only we can give one another. Today we ask, please, God, inscribe us in the book of life, in the book of merit, in the book of forgiveness. But in the prayer Unatana Tokef, we say, you, God, open the book of remembrance, and it speaks for itself. For every person has signed it with their own deeds. As if to say that our life story is a work of art that we co-author with God, each day adding our small part to the pages of those who came before us. When officiating at funerals, I often like to tell the grandchildren about a teaching from the Zohar, the most important work of Jewish mysticism, which claims that when grandparents die, they become guardian angels for their grandchildren. Contemporary author and psychotherapist Rabbi Naomi Levy asks, what if heaven isn't that far away from us? Isn't God everywhere? Why should an eternal soul that comes from God be banished to some distant stratosphere? Maybe memory isn't the closest thing we have to the people we lost. Perhaps their souls are closer than we think. Perhaps they are right here among us in some parallel dimension, watching and even participating in our lives in ways that we can only sense, but we cannot see. One of our congregants, a preschool dad, recently shared with me a powerful and mysterious experience he had on his first trip to Israel as a young adult. He's never been a religious person and still isn't, but he's really more of an agnostic, but this experience really stayed with him and continues to inspire him today. When he described it to me, I was flashing back to my own very similar experience at the Western Wall when I was a college freshman. He said, I placed my hands and my forehead on those gigantic ancient stones and closed my eyes. And suddenly, in the most real way I could imagine, I could feel a warm hand on my right shoulder. And with my inner vision, I looked in my mind's eye and saw that it was my grandfather. And on the left, the hand of my deceased uncle. And behind them, with hands on their shoulders, were other Jewish men with hands on each other's shoulders, extending backwards an enormous, unending triangle of power, support, and wisdom. So as we sing these words that our people have sung for thousands of years, as we enter the Musaf service, I want to invite us to enter the power of the first blessing of the Amidah, the Imahot and the Avot, the foremothers and the forefathers, to really feel the presence of the ones who came before us, that now stand behind us. I invite you now, and while we're praying, to close your eyes and look back in your mind's eye and feel into the darkness. Whose warm hands are resting on your shoulders, offering you support and guidance? Whose loving, bright faces do you see looking back at you? You don't have to be Jewish. We all have healed ancestors that I believe are waiting, just waiting for us to ask for support. Almost 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Tarfon used to say, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. It's not your responsibility to finish the work. V'lo ata ben chorin lihibatel mimena. But neither are you free to desist from it. What is your small part in this community, in this world? Rabbi Shimon Jacobson teaches, we do not have to be like the giants of the past. We just have to do what is in our power, stand on their shoulders. When we do so, we lay claim to everything that they achieved, plus we add our own small part. And that small part, added to the good deeds of our ancestors, might just be enough to tip the scales and bring redemption. We can rebuild Little Jerusalem right here on our campus. not just by collecting the relics of the old Little Jerusalem, the stones of the old city, so to speak. I refer to this place as our campus because along with the Hebrew school, the preschool, the kitchen, the mural, the shuk, the yurt, and the backwoods, we have a real opportunity. The Little Jerusalem of our time can be built in cooperation with all of our relations, including the plants and animals that we share this land with. We have enough acreage back there to develop an ecological village and a permaculture garden that supplies the food pantry. We can establish a new outdoor sacred space with a wood-fired oven to cook challah and matzah in for our community, and create our own Jewish fire rituals like the one the Baal Shem Tov did. It doesn't just have to be a story that we tell and that the story saves us. We can make our own rituals. We can bring them back to life. How will you write yourself into the next chapter of our great story? Contributing your unique passions and talents to the community will not only help others, but it will also help you to be happier and live a more meaningful life. I've only been here for 2.5 months, but already I've seen so many inspiring examples of this, and so many of them are in front of me right now. Sorry, I lost my place. Oh. I know there are too many to mention right now. I was going to try to say the names of all these different people, and then I was like, I can't do that. There's too many. But each of you has something really important to share, and I know that doing this work lifts you up and makes your life more meaningful and rich. In just a few minutes, we'll quote from the prophet Isaiah in the Musaf Amida prayers, "V'haya b'yom ha'u yitaka b'shofar gadol." And it will be on that day the great shofar will be blown. The Midrash tells us that this horn, that the great shofar horn, belonged to the ram that was sacrificed instead of Isaac, which we read about in today's Torah reading. The first horn of this ram was blown at Sinai, and the larger one will herald the beginning of the Messianic era, which we are entering in our time. We live in an era of time that began with the sound of the shofar coming through the fire on Mount Sinai, and will end with the sound of the shofar in the Messianic era, when the dream that God spoke at Mount Sinai becomes realized, and when the world's creatures are living together peacefully, each with divine dignity and hope. The most central mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah is to hear the sound of the shofar. If you listen really deep within the chaos and the tumult of the world, you can hear that shofar blast, that great shofar of the future redemption approaching slowly from the distance, getting stronger and stronger and stronger. This year, may we begin to hear the cry of the shofar gadol, the great shofar, the cry of our own souls, reminding us to wake up and take a more active role in the story of our people and the story of creation. What new chapter will you help us write in this epic story of Vermont Jewish life? Shana Tova, next year in the new Little Jerusalem.